So your business is ready to build or rebuild a website. And typically you'd want to jump into a design tool and start picking fonts and colors because that's usually the fun part. But that's usually what leads to sites that look really good but fail to convert. Before touching any design tool, there's a planning process I like to go through first, which completely changes the outcome. I'm gonna walk you through those steps and talk through the thinking behind them so that you can understand them better. Hi, I'm Jesse, and I have just over 20 years experience of design and development, mainly in marketing. So let's get into the video. So I'm using a tool called FigJam on this. You could use anything. It's a whiteboarding tool. You could use something like Miro or an actual physical whiteboard, or you could write this down on paper. The format doesn't really matter. It's just getting these ideas down to help you in your design later on down the road. So the first thing I like to do here is define what the goal is. So I like to document these 3 items as part of the goal. So the goal, the action that the user has to take to achieve that goal, and how you measure it. Because if you can't measure it, then it's really hard to tell if the goal that you set is working or not. In this use case, we're going to work with a fictitious interior decorator, and we'll use that as an example. So the goal here would be to book a call or a consultation. So book a consultation. And the action that someone's going to take to do that is they're going to click on the CTA for that. So click on the booking CTA. And the way you're going to measure that is through form submissions. So I typically like to set one goal. Sometimes you can get into primary goals and secondary goals, but for this case, I'm just going to stick to one for this example, just to keep it simple. Once you have your goal set, we can move on to the next step. Okay, so we set the goal for our interior decorator. Let's call her Sarah so that she has a name. What we want to do now is figure out who is visiting Sarah's site. And there are a few items here that we want to figure out about them. Who they are, what their problem is, how are they going to find Sarah, and what do they need to feel? And this is kind of building up a profile on that audience, which you could take further at a different step. But these are just the 4 main things that I kind of like to focus on here. We need to find out who this person is. And AI's deep research tools have made this a lot easier for small businesses who may not have a pool of users already built up that they can send surveys out to. I personally like using Notebook LM. It's been really good for research, I've found, and it's free. So through our research, we may find out that Sarah's customer may be a new homeowner or someone who just doesn't feel comfortable with their space anymore, and they just don't know what to do to fix it. So we can add a homeowner who's recently moved in or renovating. Their problem may be that their space feels outdated or disconnected, and they don't really feel at home. So how do they find Sarah? There are some search terms that someone might use, like interior decorator near me. A good way to see what search terms people may be using to try to find you is to enter in some of these keywords in a Google search bar and see what the autocomplete gives you. And that might give you some ideas that you may not have thought of. So what do they need to feel? They need to be confident that Sarah understands their tastes, and maybe that it's low risk to reach out. So now that we have some information on who Sarah's audience is, we can move on to the next step. Now, I want to take a quick pause here, because this is one of the most important parts of this process, but it's often the most overlooked. And that's the messaging, the actual words on your website. Because even if your site is well structured, if it has bad messaging, you can still be losing visitors. So there's a messaging framework that I like to use. It's called StoryBrand, and it's by Donald Miller. And there's plenty of information on it on YouTube that you can find and learn more about it, since I can't really cover it all in this video, but this will kind of give you the gist of it. The quick rundown on it is the hero of the story is the audience, the visitor of your site, not you and not your brand. It's the visitors. And you're trying to speak to their internal problem, not your service. So this is laying out how that messaging follows through on something like a landing page. So you have your hero, they have a problem. So the purpose is you want to make them feel seen. The guide is you. This is where you come into the story. So you want to lead with empathy and then your credentials. And then you want to give them a 3-step plan. And this is what's going to remove that fear of the unknown. And then you want social proof. So these should be more stories of transformation and not just generic testimonials or Google reviews that just say something like great service. And then you have a closing CTA. There's definitely more to it than that, but that's kind of a quick rundown on how I've structured it for this template specifically. So the messaging here for the hero is your home should feel like you. And then you're going to have the CTA of book a free consultation. You may have more headlines and subheadlines and body copy, but I just wanted to keep this simple for this demonstration. So the problem here is, most people know something's off, but don't know where to start. So there's just a quick message here as the guide. We've helped 50 plus homeowners. There's a 3-step plan. You book a free consultation. We build your vision together, and then you love your space. So we have our social proof, our testimonial here, and then we have our closing section with the CTA repeated. So now we get into the final step of the process, and that's actually sketching things out. So you could do this on paper or within the same tool. I like to do these on paper sometimes also if I'm trying to get a little creative with the layout. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to show you here in FigJam. And really what we're doing is we're just taking the information that we had in the messaging and transferring it over into a wireframe here. And this is showing how each section would be laid out. And we've moved over everything. So the problem, guide, the plan, the social proof, closing CTA. And this is just showing how that would look on a landing page. So we're only working on one page of the site here. I called out here that there would be a portfolio link, process, and then the book CTA in the header. The way this is really laid out is in the hero, this is what's hooking them in. The problem, this is what's making them feel seen. This is what's building trust when you introduce yourself as the guide. And then the 3-step process is what's removing friction because they see what the process is and that it's only 3 steps. And then the testimonials is what lets the clients convince them that you're trustworthy. And then the final CTA is what's sealing the deal for you there. So this is just the homepage of the site, but we could do this for other pages also. So the portfolio might have a different goal because that's showing work. So you could go back and redo this process for the portfolio page. Or maybe there's another marketing landing page where you're trying to sell a specific service that may have a slightly different goal. You would just take all these steps and take them through the same process. And that's how you would get to the content messaging that you need to put on that page. So that's the whole process. Setting a goal, doing audience research, planning out your content, and then doing a rough sketch. But what I want you to take away from this is that the planning is the work. Because as soon as you start going into design, you're doing things based on what looks good, not what your customers actually want. And that's how you end up with a site that looks really nice, but isn't converting. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.